Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Jules Math Tools. In our session today, we're going to be looking at part 2 of how to solve angles on a straight lines involving expressions. And if you want to learn how to master this skill, stay tuned. In today's session, we're going to be calculating angles on a straight line involving expressions, and this is part 2 in my videos on solving angles on straight lines with expression. In our first example, we're asked to calculate the measure of our unknown angle, and in our question, instead of just giving angles, we're given terms and expressions. So the first thing we're going to need to do when we're getting started is to remember to always write out your equation first. To remind yourself that m plus 2m plus 40 degrees plus m plus 20 degrees is equal to 180 degrees. So you always start by writing out our equation first. Now we're going to collect or group our like terms together. We have two terms involved in this equation. We have our constants, which is 40 and 20, and then we have our terms with our coefficient in variables, or our terms involving variables such as m, 2m, and m. So we're going to be adding all of our m's together. So we have m plus 2m plus another m, so 1 plus 2 is equal to 3, and 3 plus 1 is equal to 4m. Now we're going to be adding 40 degrees plus 20 degrees, which is equal to 60 degrees. And we're going to return our 180 degrees back to our equation. Now we're going to collect our like terms again by subtracting our 60 from our 180 degrees. So 4m will equal to 180 degrees minus 60 degrees, which will equal to our 120 degrees. And if you're following these steps, this should look similar to when you're solving your two-step equations. So if you're able to solve two-step equations, you should be okay with solving equations or solving angles when it's involving terms, expressions, and your constants. So remember that you need to practice your two-step equation skills in order to master this skill as well. And if you need help with that, I will make sure to link my video on solving two-step equations in the description box below. So now that we have 4m equals 120, our next step is going to be to divide 4m into 120 so that we can get the measure of one single m. So since I have 4m here, I'm now going to be dividing 120 degrees into 4 parts. And when 120 is divided by 4, you know that 12 divided by 4 is equal to 3. And 4 into 0 will give us 0. So my m will equal to 30 degrees. So now that we found the measure for m, which is equal to 30 degrees, we now need to go back and solve all of these individual angles. So my first angle I solved was m. So I know that m is equal to 30 degrees. Now I need to find out what is the measure of 2m plus 40 degrees. And remembering that my m is equal to 30 degrees, it means I'm now going to be multiplying 2 times 30 degrees and then adding that to 40 degrees. So 2 times 30 degrees is equal to 60 degrees, and when 60 degrees is added to 40 degrees, this will equal to 100 degrees. So my second angle, 2m plus 40 degrees, is equal to 100 degrees. And now to solve my final angle, which is m plus 20 degrees. Again, m is equal to 30 degrees, so I have 30 degrees plus 20 degrees, which will equal to 50 degrees. So my final angle is equal to 50 degrees. And now our most important step is to check our answers. Remember that all of these angles are supposed to add up to 180 degrees. That means I'm now going to be adding my 30 degrees plus 100 degrees plus 50 degrees. And again, all of this should equal to 180 degrees. So 30 plus 100 is 130 degrees, and when 130 degrees is added to 50 degrees, we get 180 degrees. So since my angles all sum to 180 degrees, that means that the measure that I got for each of these angles, which is 30 degrees, 100 degrees, and 50 degrees, is correct. Let's try another example. Feel free at this point to pause the video, calculate the measure of our given angles in our expressions and our terms, and then when you're ready you can unpause the video and work along with me to see if you got the exact same answer. Okay, so we're going to begin again by writing out our equation, stating that 3p plus 20 degrees plus 5p plus 2p plus 5 degrees is equal to 180 degrees. And again, we're going to begin by working out our like terms, which is our 3p, our 5p, and my 2p, and adding them together. So 5 plus 3 is 8, and 8 plus 2 is 10p. So we have 10p being added to 20 plus 5 is 25 degrees, equal to 180 degrees. Now we're going to be collecting our like terms again, which in our 25 and my 180 degrees are both constants. So I'm going to subtract. Remember that with your two-step equation, if you're adding on one side, we subtract on the other side. So we have 10p, so 180 degrees minus 25 degrees. Just in case I have any persons who may still need to see their little rough work. You know, I forgot to do it in the first part of our question, but I'm going to make sure that I continue adding it in this part, which leaves us with 155 degrees. So we have 10p equal to 155 degrees. And now we will be dividing. So we have 10p equals to 155 degrees. We need to find out what is the measure of one single p. So I'm going to take that 10 and divide it into my 155 degrees. I'll set up my long division for this part of our question. So my 10 divide into 155 degrees. 10 divides into 15 one time. 1 times 10 is 10. 15 minus 10 leaves us with 5. We're going to bring down our 5, changing 5 into 55. 10 goes into 55 5 times. 5 times 10 is 50. And 50 minus 50 subtracted from 55 degrees is 5 degrees. And remember, we're going to move into our decimal remainders. So I'm going to be adding in my decimal point, adding in my 0, bringing down that 0, and changing my 5 into 50. And 10 goes into 50 5 times. 5 times 10 is 50. And 50 subtracts 50 is 0. So my P will be equal to 15.5 degrees. So now that we found out what P is, we now need to go back and find out what each of our individual angles measure equals. So we're going to start with our 3P plus 20. So 3P plus 20 degrees, remembering that P is equal to 15.5 degrees. So my 3 will be multiplied to 15.5 degrees. And then its product added to 20 degrees. 15.5 times 3. 3 times 5 is 15. Carry our 1. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 1 will be 16. Put our 6, carry the 1. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 will be 4. And again, adding in our decimal point. Remember, 1 digit behind the decimal point here, none here. So in total, we should have 1 digit behind the decimal point. So we'll count 1, endpoint at decimal point, and we now have 46.5 degrees added to 20 degrees. So we're adding 20. We're going to bring down our 5, bring down our decimal point. 6 plus 0 is 6. 4 plus 2 is 6. And this angle's measure is equal to 66.5 degrees. Okay, so we found the measure of the first part of our angle, which is 66.5 degrees. Now we're going to be calculating 5p. So we have 5 times 15.5 degrees, and 15.5 times 5. 5 times 5 is 25. Carry our 2. 5 times 5 is 25, plus 2 is 27. Put the 7, carry a 2. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2 is 7. We'll input our decimal points. And remember, with inputting your decimal point, it goes back to the same first step we did when we multiplied 15.5 times 3. So our 5 times 15.5 degrees is equal to 77.5 degrees. So that is the measure of our second angle, which is 77.5 degrees. And now let's calculate the final angle, which is our 2p added to our 5 degrees. Remembering that 2 will be multiplied to 15.5 degrees and its product added to 5. So again, we're going to multiply 15.5 times 2. 5 times 2 is 10. Put our 0, carry the 1. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 1 will give us 11. Put our 1, carry the 1. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 will be 3. We're going to input our decimal point the same way we did in our previous steps, which is 1 digit behind the decimal point. So this is equal to 31 degrees. Remember that 31.0 is the same thing as 31. The only difference is this is 31 is written in its whole number form, and 31.1 is written in more of its decimal form, but both numbers are exactly the same thing. So 31 degrees plus 5 degrees, and 31 plus 5 will be 36 degrees. So our 2p plus 5 is equal to 36 degrees. And now to perform our final step. I know that working was a bit tedious, but it is important that you still perform your check. Remember, you are always your last resort between turning in the correct answer and turning in the incorrect answers. And if there is a way to check your answer, I always recommend that you take that extra time and, just as a precaution, check your answers to make sure that everything is worked out correctly. So we're going to add up all of our angles, remembering that everything should add up to 180 degrees. And if it doesn't, that means you need to go back, check your workings, go through everything. And sometimes it's good to start with the measure that you got for angle P. Make sure that what you worked out for P is correct, because if P is correct, then it means everything else, as long as you work it out correctly, should also be correct. But if P is incorrect, that means all of this working that we did for 3p plus 20 degrees, and then 5p, and then 2p plus 5 degrees, that means everything in each of these steps will also be incorrect. So this step is very important in helping you to check your answer, just to make sure that everything is worked out correctly. Okay, so always take that extra step and check your answers first. So 5 plus 5 is 10. We put our 0, carry the 1. 6 plus 1 is 7. 7 plus 7 is 14. 14 plus 6 is 20. So we put our 0, carry the 2. 2 plus 6 is 8. 8 plus 7 is 15, and 15 plus 3 is 18. And we drop our decimal point right down from where it is. So we see that when we sum all of these angles that we got in our diagram, they do add up to 180 degrees, which is a bit of a relief for us. But still yet, it doesn't hurt to also go back and still check your working just to make sure that everything is indeed correct and you did everything right. You went through all of your steps correctly. So even though the working is a bit tedious, it's always important to check your answer. So remember that the best way for all of this to stick and you to get better at it is always to practice. So remember, a link is in the description box for you to take you to another question that you can practice just to make sure that you are able to master everything we did today. And until next time, this is Jules Math Tools, where math is made easy.